Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have Congressman Mark Pocan back on, a Democrat representing Wisconsin's 2nd District. Serves on the House Appropriations Committee, co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus. Also has a podcast with Liberty and Justice for Some. And his birthday's coming up on Thursday, I've heard. So happy birthday in advance.
Thanks, Dean. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. A lot going on. You leave D.C. and Donald Trump sends the troops in. I'm not sure what's your reaction to Donald Trump sending and just lying about the crime rate. Like it didn't even matter. Like it doesn't matter. Nothing matters.
It appears to be in reaction too, because last week one of Elon Musk's kind of henchmen, the guy with the nickname Big Balls, was attacked in D.C. And DC has lowered its crime rates, but I'm not here to talk about that. The fact that the president is so desperate not to talk about either the Epstein files or, more importantly, the one big ugly law and the real ramifications that all the members are afraid to do town halls or else they blow up on him. He's going to now start sending National Guard into places like DC. And, honestly, in Wisconsin, we just had like 10, 11 inches of rain in some parts of the Milwaukee area, and our governor had to send National Guard there to help out because it's a real issue. When he does things like this, he actually, puts us potentially at risk when you really have a need for a National Guard.
I mean, yesterday's press conference was like a clown car come to life, one after the other. Jeanine Pirro complaining that she can't touch 14 and 15-year-olds. That's what she really said. I can't touch 14 and 15-year-olds. Mike, thank God you can't touch them. And she meant in a criminal way, but it just sounded jarring to hear her say, like, she wanted to touch it. And then Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel saying the murder rate's the lowest it's ever been. Like, he did that in 6 months. But if the murder rate's the lowest it's ever been across the nation, why did they send the National Guard here? And Pam Bondi literally gets out there and goes, crime ends today in D.C. I'm like, well, we're done. And you've just ended it.
Yeah.
They really are not good at any of this. And at the same time, I don't want to just mock them because there's they pose a threat to our freedoms and our republic, but they are really inept in so many ways.
Yeah, no question. But what's really hard is the actual policy things they're doing. To think a president thinks he can just send a militarized police force into a city. Now, DC is different than I think every other city because of the relationship with the federal government. And I understand that. But, just the fact that he's, again, putting on another distraction. LA was the best example. I talked to someone about this yesterday. It was 3 square blocks in LA where there were some problems that were occurring. And yet he sent, 700 troops or something. Again, totally ridiculous, unnecessary, not needed at the moment. But it was to reinforce his narrative that we've got to, somehow, kick people out of the country who are criminals. And yet that's not what he's doing. And, the real thing that I'm trying to talk about every chance I get that I've been home is that this big, ugly law is going to kick people in Wisconsin off of healthcare. It's going to kick kids off of food assistance. It's going to make people who are getting, support through public education, either at the higher education level or K-12, losing funding. And at the same time, he's going to add trillions to the national debt that our grandkids could potentially be paying for, also that he and Elon Musk get a tax cut. That is what we need to talk about, because that is what Donald Trump's really about. And all the other stuff he does are colorful distractions from talking about the fact that he thinks so little of the average family in Wisconsin that he doesn't think it's a problem to take away their health care.
No, those are fundamentally important. The last thing I'd say about yesterday is Trump undermined his lie that Nancy Pelosi controls the National Guard in D.C. Remember? Yeah. Nancy Pelosi didn't send the National Guard. It was all her. Well, you just did it like a snap of the finger because the president has the exclusive power over the National Guard on federal property in the District of Columbia. And I don't know why the media didn't bring that up more, although some are now asking, you pardon people who beat up police officers. Now you're talking about yesterday how much you want police officers to be protected. You literally pardon people who beat police officers, and 4 of them committed suicide after what they endured because of Trump supporters.
Yeah, there's an actual attack on the Capitol on January 6th that he didn't send troops in, and now he's sending them in. And it's interesting. He's doing it while Congress is gone. I don't quite know if there's any rationale or if it's just in reaction to the person who worked with Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is still obviously very closely involved. We saw the money he donated recently to Trump and Republicans. It's more they realized how toxic he was. Even Donald Trump said, oh, my God, he's toxic, that they had to kind of put him out of there. But this was, and I think in reaction again to that attack. And When I go around to anywhere, people are talking about tariffs and costs. People are talking about this big ugly bill, and they're worried about healthcare and food assistance. And honestly, they're watching around the world, and they're seeing some of the visuals coming out of Gaza with starving, dying kids. And this is what Donald Trump's really about, and we need to keep that focus just repeated over and over on these items.
I'm chatting with Congressman Mark Pocan. So let's talk about tariffs. I'm curious the impact by you and on inflation. Today we got the CPI report, and it said that food prices didn't go up last month at all, which defies common sense. We all see food prices going up. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's legitimate because it's trailing and we're going to see it more next month, or now because after he fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the Trump regime, you've got to say what Trump wants or you're fired. And the new guy he nominated is awful. But what are you seeing in Wisconsin in terms of inflation with food and other things?
Yeah, so I've been a small business owner for 37 years. I had hair. I think I might have even had a waist that was under 30 at the time, right? I don't have that anymore. And, what we know from doing what I have done for so long is there's a lag when you do a tariff, right? So it might take 6 to, I've heard up to 18 months even to have the impact felt, because first the market's got to absorb it. First, everyone build up an inventory tariffs. Then, there's the lag as it goes through and who's going to wind up paying for it. But it's the importer brings it in, and generally the cost at the end of the day gets passed on to the consumer. And you're going to see that rising in the coming months. So I think between now and next year, you'll definitely every month, I think, see more and more of it, but it does have a lag. But what we do know is he's done nothing to reduce costs, period. That was the big promise in November. People understand that hasn't happened. And now we're going to slowly see these other costs go up. And because the big ugly law, anyone on the Affordable Care Act, you're going to see this huge increase in health insurance rates, which is going to make more uninsured people go to hospitals, which means they're going to have to raise rates, which means we're all going to pay more for health insurance also. So I think much of this is probably destined to be seen more in 2026. Just based on everything I've experienced doing this for the vast majority of my life. But you're going to keep seeing it tick up very, very soon.
Well, I just talked about it on my show and wrote an article about how the concern, if you can't rely on the economic data, it's something Jerome Powell has talked about. You need to be able to rely on it. Investors need to be able to rely on it. Businesses for planning if things are slowing down. But also, if they end up not telling the truth about inflation, people on Social Security will not get the correct adjustment in the cost of living adjustment. So it has a real world impact. Argentina, they had people in their administration in the 2000s that lied about inflation when everyone saw it was going up. They lied to the point where it caused an economic catastrophe in their nation. It catches up to you. And I don't think this administration has any credibility, anyone, because of Trump. I mean, the head of it is a convicted felon who was convicted of falsifying business records. I mean, why would I trust any business record, anything he says? He's convicted of 34 felonies for falsifying business records.
Well, and the person he's replacing because he didn't like the job numbers of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is someone who is, even conservatives say he's a bad economist, and I'm waving my fingers. I know that's bad to do on radio because no one sees me doing it. But this is a guy from the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is the group behind Project 2025. Like, you're not going to get any truth telling or actual numbers out of it. And this is one thing that, don't care who's president, you kind of need to have the right numbers to do everything else we do as a society, or else all of a sudden you could have hyperinflation. You could have all sorts of other things all of a sudden sneak up on us. So Donald Trump inflating his ego could have a lot of down the road costs for all of us.
Very much so. And the guy that Trump appointed, Steve Bannon, championed this guy. This guy was on Steve Bannon's podcast 2 weeks ago, where all reputable economists go. You go on Steve Bannon's podcast, like that's where all the top guys in the economy world, they line up. It's like, so it's so laughable. He was on Bannon's podcast, Heritage guy, and now he's going to be, and he's questioned everything. And his whole thing is about, we need a MAGA data guy. So we're not going to be able to believe anything. It's kind of bizarre to live in the United States of America where you should question whatever administration tells you about anything. You should question it organically. This is just assume it's a lie until you can fact check otherwise and find out that it's true. And that's bad for everything, bad for the economy, bad for our businesses. But I wanted to shift to something else. You've been mentioning about how unpopular the Trump bill is and where Trump is. I saw a video of Republican member of Congress, Mike Flood from Nebraska, who got flooded with booze. Like the
Yes.
flooding was really bad for him, and it didn't stop. 700 people, and they were chanting like "tax the rich" at one point. So what's going on? What can you share about why Republicans in Nebraska, which is a red state, are getting booed for the entire time?
You're still seeing very few town halls by Republicans. In fact, of the most competitive 35 districts, I think Brian Style and maybe David Valadeo, I don't think I'm missing anyone, are the only two to actually have done one. And they ended miserably, much like floods, with a lot of people giving a lot of negative feedback on the big ugly law. But the real problem is those who won't do it. I mean, I am a little obsessed on, I think every Democrat should go into a Republican district and do a town hall if the Republican won't, because forget the numbers, he said, she said. The best way to show that they are lying is to say, if this bill is as good as it is, you would want to get on the rooftop and scream about it, right? You want to take credit for your vote.
Sure.
Instead, they're all hiding in their basements. And those of us doing town halls, we hear that people are upset and concerned, but they're not actually doing that because they know they can't credibly. Either they have to, in a couple cases I've watched, they think they're smarter than their constituents. Obviously, they aren't. Their constituents blew them up big time. But this is the problem. So it doesn't pass the smell test. And that is the most important thing. If people at the end of the day go, no, they're lying, they're just lying about it, because they are, that, really, I think, helps us moving forward to prove what they're doing is not in the best interest of their constituents.
Yeah, I saw Flood. He was saying with some of the other Republicans, well, if we didn't vote for this, your taxes were going to go up. And the people just started booing. They're like, you're lying to us, because it's not the way this impacts people in so many other parts of their life. They got an ACA subsidy, they got SNAP benefits. If they were on Medicaid and they're getting the health care. I've had, in the last 2 weeks, I had Representative Latifah Simon on last week, and another friend, Steve Way, who's a disability rights activist, and she's legally blind, and talked about disability. The cruelty that this is going to visit to that community is off the chart. So it doesn't, this idea that your taxes were going to go up, no one believed that, but the pain they're going to cause is very, very real.
Well, just the amount of cuts to healthcare is equal to the tax cuts for people who make over $500,000 a year, right? That's the people who benefit. People who can actually afford to belong to Mar-a-Lago are the people who are getting something. But what hasn't really been told a lot, Dean, is, because of all those tax cuts for the wealthy, Social Security just lost a year of life. It's been calculated. Now we have one less year available that we're going to have to fix this, but we just lost a year because of this. And don't forget, there's $500 billion of cuts to Medicare in this bill. So everyone says, I'll never touch Medicare and Social Security. They lied. There's two significant cuts that have not been talked about, in addition to the Medicaid cuts, in addition to the Affordable Care health subsidies that are going to affect a lot of people. So, this we need to talk about a whole lot more, I think, and get that message out, because everyone is impacted by Social Security and Medicare.
Definitely. I also want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein a lot, but that's a different story. So I saw you posting online about the Trump administration's latest attack on civil service is stripping collective bargaining rights from VA workers. I was not even aware of this until I read your social media feed and your post. What can you share about this? What's going on?
Well, again, part of Project 2025, right, is to get rid of unions. Unions are us, our voices combined together to fight for safe working conditions and better benefits, better pay. But ultimately, the idea that you go to work and you come home at the end of the day, you don't have to worry about not because of your working conditions. And that's why you have unions. Well, federal employee unions, we're now saying for someone who works with veterans, which I think is a very important job, that you're taking away their job protections. Well, you know what? That means some people who are good people are going to leave that area, because there's other areas they can get job protections, and that ultimately hurts our veterans. So, between that and firing so many people at the VA who often are setting the appointments for veterans at VA hospitals, there's just a lot of attacks that are very indirect, but absolutely felt by people who've, put their lives at risk for this country. And the rhetoric of Republicans certainly doesn't match the reality of what they're doing.
This administration, the DOGE cuts, the big ugly bill, so much of this inflicts pain, all to give a tax cut to the wealthy. I mean, and that almost seems simplistic, but that's literally what we're dealing with here.
Yes. Yeah, it is that simple, right? And that's why people are probably yelling tax the rich. Back to Social Security for a second. I mean, we can extend that fund 75 years in the future. We'll never have to have a debate as long as you and I are alive, and people a generation younger than us won't be alive, if we would just lift the cap on where people pay. Right now, about 170,000, you don't pay another dime in. It's a regressive tax. So there's a lot of things that if the wealthy just paid their fair share. But another important thing to remind people on the big ugly law, the few little tax cuts that real people can benefit from, the no tax on tips for a small percent of them, no overtime for, again, with a bunch of asterisks, the no interest on auto loans, and the senior cut, all of those add up to 5% of this law, and they're all temporary. The other tax cuts for the wealthy have been made permanent, as had previously the tax cuts for corporations. So again, this just pounds over and over. The average person doesn't mean anything to the Trump administration. You're a tool that they use to make sure that the wealthy get wealthier and continue to have this elite privileged status they have. And that's why, ultimately, if we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, which, people actually don't back home don't really want to talk about as much as people maybe on TV and in Washington, but it's the idea that elites somehow feel like they're treated differently. And again, not sharing a list that's, I can guarantee, has got Donald Trump's name. We've seen this many times. He's just more of embarrassment, but he wants to protect himself. Look, what I want to do is protect that family that's going to lose health insurance, because we know what happens if you don't have it. And if then that has a ripple effect, rural hospitals get more people in with no insurance, they're going to cover it. That's going to make all of our rates go up, or you're going to lose more rural hospitals. Place like Wisconsin, we can't afford to do that. I'm worried about that 101 of economics, not just for the elite.
And I think that's such an important point, and that's something that we have to talk about more. And sometimes even I get sucked into what's the Beltway kind of agenda that's set up there. But we've done our best to try to cover the real world impact of this legislation from activists from different communities talking about it. So let's shift gears and talk about foreign policy for a second, because a lot of it has an emotional impact. Right now we have Netanyahu massing troops. It looks like he's going to go into Gaza City. There's a lot of, even Germany said we're going to suspend weapons until further notice because of what you're doing, anything that could be used offensively. What's your concerns? This could be even worse than we've already seen the horrors over the last year and a half.
Well, I don't know how you could get any worse. You've basically leveled Gaza. You've killed tens of thousands of people. You've permanently maimed tens of thousands of people. And you're seeing pictures of starving kids and starving people in Gaza. And somehow we're supposed to have a talk about whether or not they release the final hostages. Of course, we want the hostages released, but we also want hungry kids not shot when they're getting food, right? And that's the visuals that are coming out right now. And I think the important thing is we're seeing countries step up around the world who've just had it and saying, we're recognizing Palestine. We're going to start doing that. And I think that's an important step, but I also think pressure has to be on Netanyahu. There should be no US dollars, period, going to Israel as long as this is continuing. I support defensive weapons, and I wish we had more around the world, quite honestly, not just for Israel, but for many different situations. I think it's a smart way of saving lives. But even that, right now, you have to send a message that what they're doing is an ethnic cleansing, a genocide, a killing of a people. And if we're not willing to speak out on that, where's our humanity on this? So, a bunch of members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, just traveled with a group called AIPAC that has, I think, a very jaunted view of this whole issue. They're basically Netanyahu's cheerleaders, right? And this guy's a war criminal. He's an internationally recognized war criminal. There's a warrant for his arrest by the International Court, and he should be treated as such, not like he's actually a leader doing something right.
He was on Fox News last week lying that, we didn't destroy the buildings. Hamas somehow had the armaments to destroy all the buildings in Gaza. And I had Rula Jibril on a few days ago who made a great point. That she said, we all know that's a lie, but she said the best reason, the proof we have, there's Israeli soldiers that have bragged in videos showing themselves detonating buildings in the area and just eliminating it. And also I had on Professor Omar Barta from Brown University, who talked in great detail how the Israeli military would move the people out and then level the whole area. And their goal was to make it uninhabitable. And that's why he defined genocide in a very specific, detailed way that's consistent with the definition of the UN and the world, not what some people want to throw around the definition, but part of it making it unlivable and uninhabitable for a group of people. It is part of the definition of genocide. There's no doubt this is genocide. I mean, I cite these experts. It's not me saying it, it's them saying it.
Well, and killing the only journalists that are in Gaza to talk about what's happening, like we just saw they did with some folks from Al Jazeera, and then, from what I can tell, completely concocted charges about, the one lead journalist in particular somehow being, part of Hamas. We know that within Gaza there were 2.3 million people. Many were under the employ of the government, which was Hamas at the time. That doesn't mean you're a militant with Hamas, and to use that as an excuse to kill many journalists. They just don't want the stories coming out. They just don't want the bad press. And, it's at the point where we need more people to speak out. And I think you're seeing it, and that's good. But around the world, they're seeing it a lot faster than we are in the United States.
Very much so. And with that journalist that they killed from Al Jazeera, they've been alleging for a year that he had ties to Hamas. He was saying, I didn't, but he was very open where he was reporting. Why they killed him now is a curious question. And obviously I think it's because he's one of the last reporters in, and they're about to go in to do some really horrific things, because they could have killed him anytime this year. He's out there reporting live in Gaza. He's not hiding. They have the best technology in the world, Netanyahu and the IDF. I'm sure they saw him on drones. They chose this time to kill him along with other journalists, for a reason about they don't want anybody's eyes there. They don't let journalists in.
It's the visuals that are moving people right now. To see the starving, emaciated kids, and then that when they've gone to get support, they get shot. Like, all of this stuff there's accountability on this, and there is no justification on this. And I think that's what's moving the final steps of public opinion. But again, someone who has been to that region a few times, and 3 times, I think, in particular, this is something that goes beyond, I think, anyone trying to justify any more. Netanyahu is a war criminal, should be treated as such. He should have to go and have accountability. And for us to support him on anything right now until that accountability happens is a mistake. We wouldn't do it anywhere else on the planet. I
agree. Do you think it's meaningful that France, Canada, Australia are going to recognize the Palestinian state? It looks like the UK is as well, because nothing's changing there. So they made it conditional for September to be here at the UN.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the international voice speaking out. All right. And I think within the US, we have to have more people doing that, and in a bipartisan way, because, I remember when I was there, I often saw Israelis and Palestinians at dinners working together, people who are on the ground. I mean, yes, there are certainly some right-wing folks within the Netanyahu coalition that want to just level as they are doing to Gaza right now. But the average person I met, that wasn't. They just wanted peace, right? They didn't want missiles coming out of Gaza. They don't want to be killing people. And we need to get back to that. But you won't ever, as long as Netanyahu is there. And part of our pressure back is we just stop funding until Netanyahu is held accountable and maybe not there. But short of that, you're going to continue to see things that are the worst things you could possibly see on the planet happening over and over again. And if we don't speak out, then it's in our name.
It's well put. I'm saying, Congressman Mark Pocan. The last 2 things. One is Trump on Friday is going to Alaska to meet Putin, but Trump referred to Alaska as Russia twice yesterday. Does that mean he's going to give Putin Alaska? Is that what's good? That's the peace deal. He gives him.
It depends how big the hotel he's offered. I'm not sure, right? That's the problem. Right?
If he wanted to give Trump Florida, I'd be like, okay, we can debate that. I'm like, all right, maybe if it takes DeSantis with him, but I'm not sure. What do you think is going to come out of this? Because Trump is from like, we're going to make a deal, to he's trying to lower expectations, to you're not bringing Zelensky. Why not meet in Munich like Neville Chamberlain and just say we got peace for our time. We gave away Ukraine.
It's simple. That's what statesmen do. He's not a statesman, right? He is a failed, bankrupted, business person who, I don't know if I told you this before, but I do want to keep Guantanamo Bay open only for the producers of Celebrity Apprentice, because I think they're the ones that, made an awful business person someone successful, and that set us down this whole path with Donald Trump. But he is a charlatan in every single way. He'll come back and claim he had some victory. Putin will play him like he always does, like a marionette, and we'll find out, what the two, send back to their countries in messaging. But at the end, we do have to support the people in Ukraine. We can't make them have to give a bunch of land to Russia. And, I hope Trump doesn't do things in his best interest again for, any kind of future hotel deals or other financial gain, but I wouldn't put it past him.
And that's the big concern. What will he do? By the way, so that your governor is not running again. How is the race shaping up? Has it begun yet, the race for governor in Wisconsin?
Yeah, a lot of people are looking at it, thinking about running. I mean, Tony Evers is probably the most decent person I'd met in politics in 30 years, Dean. Right. He and his wife went out, I think, since junior high together, and you can tell they're together. And they look at, when he gives a speech, he looks at her first. Like, they're the nicest, most decent people. And I'm glad he's going to get a chance he's put a half a century into public life. But our lieutenant governor, possibly our attorney general, the Milwaukee County executive, there's state senators, state representatives that are looking at it, and others I'm sure I'm forgetting on the list. I think we'll have a big Democratic primary. There'll be a big Republican primary. But what's most important in Wisconsin to remember for listeners is 5 assembly seats gets us the majority in the assembly, because we finally got fair maps. They picked up 10 last time. 2 Senate seats get us the majority in the state Senate. And 1 congressional seat that's definitely in play in Wisconsin gets us closer to the majority at the federal level. What really matters is the 5, 2, and 1, even more than the governor's race, because we won't know till next August who the nominee is. But right now we know we need 5 seats to pick up the state assembly, 2 seats to pick up the state Senate. And if we pick up a congressional seat, 1 of 3 we need from Wisconsin, the other 49 states can figure out the rest. That's how we get it done. So supporting that right now in my state is what makes most sense.
That sounds great. I'm glad you laid it out. Well, Congressman, thanks so much for making time. Happy birthday in advance. I look forward to chatting with you in September.
All right. Thanks so much, Dean. Appreciate being on.